Well, thanks everybody. Good morning. It's great to see everyone. I feel like we've seen each other on Zoom a couple hundred times in the last 4 months, which has been really nice. And we've been, as you guys know, unrolling a number of different educational platforms during the pandemic with our continuing education classes we've been doing through the New York Real Estate Center, which I think all of you guys have been on. We were doing NYRAC exclusive CE classes every other week, mixing it up with Q&A sessions. And recently, we thought it'd be good to kind of, with everything going on in the city reopening, as opposed to talking about a specific topic, opening up to a conversation where, 2 weeks ago, Tony Haber was on with me. Today, Heather McDonough has been kind enough to join us as well and hear about really what you guys are seeing with, we're 8 days into phase 2. What's going on. We just opened up our office yesterday on a 50-50 rotation. Predictions for the market. So with all that being said, I want to kind of just let Heather, if you want to say a couple words, and we can really just jump right into it.
Sure. Yeah, it's so great to see everybody. I haven't been on a call for a couple weeks with some personal stuff taking me out, but so it's good to be back, and it's good to be getting back to business and into the swing of things. I don't know about all of you, but it certainly hasn't been without challenges these last week, trying to get people to follow protocols and be respectful of the fact that we're still dealing with a virus. So I think for me, that's been my biggest challenge, is just dealing with that. This week or last week, I had a few people request showings, and we tried to insist that they were first virtually done, and they would push back. They wouldn't schedule. They made it difficult, and then we just wouldn't show. So it was frustrating. And then the few times that we did do Zoom calls, we were able to realize that people were looking for deals. They wanted 30% off or 20% off, or their budgets were much lower than what they were shopping for. And so it just made it worthwhile once we did do the Zoom calls, to realize that instead of going out running around town to do a showing that wasn't going to be fruitful, we were able to narrow it down by doing a Zoom call and doing it safely from our homes. So that's been my experience the last week and a half.
Yeah, so everybody, we want to kind of, just kind of get other people's perspectives in terms of how the beginning of phase 2 has been, what you're seeing in terms of trends. I know a very common sentiment in early June was that there'd be a flood of inventory hitting the market the moment phase 2 started, with you guys being able to show properties again, with an exodus of people leaving New York City. So I'm curious to see, now that we're kind of, a week later into phase 2, has that trend had any merit? Is that really was that more so just anxiety speaking during the shutdown? Are you seeing that happen? How are you seeing negotiations change? Because you guys see the negotiations before I do. And I'll be honest with you, yesterday I fielded a handful of calls for potential deals, which I was delighted to see. I thought it was great. So that has to mean, right, that things came on the market in the last 7 to 8 days, and there's interest already picking up immediately. So more so than anything, I want to really see how you're predicting negotiations to change during the next couple months.
Okay, hi, good morning. So what I've discovered over the last week is I'm getting barraged with listings that I'll be putting on in the next week or so, both rentals and sales. Nothing is inexpensive though. And on my rentals, I've had a number of showings already, and they're priced around $15,000. So that's a good sign. I don't know what kind of offers will come in though. And I have had the experience of the 30% off, those conversations are starting to take place, which we're not willing to do yet. We might kick ourselves later on, but we don't want to automatically just come down within the first week. The sales, I'm getting some interesting sales listings, and my personal attitude is to price things, and again, this may be a mistake, but I want to price things as we were in February. I don't want to automatically drop the price and shoot myself or my customers in the foot, because we don't know. And if the apartment has a absolutely fantastic view or something going for it, I don't want to be starting off too low. Again,
Right.
in August, I could regret this and wish that I had,
Nancy,
started.
let me ask you this: the people listing, is it just a rush to leave the city due to what?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing, because, and this may work for us or it may really, work against us. I have a number of people who are out in the Hamptons and they're terrified. And so they're, if you're outside of the city and you're watching everything from the news, it's much more exasperated than it is when you ride the subway for the first time, you realize it's actually okay. So they're outside of the city getting scared, and they're listing their apartments. I mean, I'm hoping that it proves to be a blurb and it worked out well for me, because suddenly people who were on the fence are deciding to sell.
Right.
And we won't know any of this until we have this conversation in late August or mid-September. So.
Well, Nancy, let me ask you this: where's inventory today in comparison to February in volume of units on the market?
Well, that I don't know. I just see every day what comes through with Perchwell, in terms of how many new apartments were signed, how many contracts were signed, how many new listings came on. I'm not seeing quite as many come on as I thought. I'm really busy, and I kind of assumed everybody was really busy, but I'm not sure that's the case. The other thing is, I've had agents that I'm friendly with who are not in New York City, who have also left the city, email and say, well, I don't want to list an overpriced apartment to just have to come and work this summer and not sell it, and I actually wrote back to when I said, I don't know that that's such a good idea. This might be a really good opportunity, especially before the election. I'm more worried about November and what's going to happen with the chaos of the elections and the stock market, and et cetera. So I think right now might be this really good window, but we don't know if the buyers are there.
Yeah, no, we definitely don't. I mean, I can tell you, I received a lot more interest over the last couple of months than I would have expected, but a lot of people are still waiting on the sidelines, like what is triggering the sense of urgency? In my opinion, the only thing that's going to trigger a sense of urgency is a good deal. And that's what everybody's sitting waiting on from what I'm seeing. I'm curious to hear your guys' perspective. You talk to more consumers than I do. By the time majority of the time I talk to them, they're at the stage where they already found a place. But I always try to, start the dialogue as far in advance as possible. And that's a sentiment I've seen.
I think if you have a very average apartment on the market, you're going to be in more trouble unless it has something that really stands out, like location or views or spectacular building. And those are the ones we won't know about yet. But I think if you have a standard third or fourth floor looking out on a courtyard or a street, you may have to adjust your pricing.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, and Heather, feel free to chime in. When you mentioned people coming in asking for 30% reductions in pricing, whenever you have, I've been doing this for 15 years. So, I saw the 2005 to 2008 construction boom. I saw the financial crisis. I saw how, the mindset of a buyer changed. And people always come in whenever New York City or the economy goes through a huge transition like it's going through now, and think I can go offer 70 cents on the dollar and get a deal, and that there's going to be, basically an opportunity to get a huge bargain on the property. And for the most part, I've never really seen, obviously the higher the price point from what I see, the larger the discount and from a percentage perspective is, right? And I don't see, more times than not, it's not a drastic change when you're talking the $1 to $3 million range. Maybe the $20 million range or $10 million range, you'll see higher percentages. But are you seeing people come in that are negotiating, that are just throwing a darts at the board, seeing what will stick, and be like, what do I got to lose? I'll try this during the summer, and then maybe I'll get realistic in September. What do you like? Heather, what do you see?
So, I mean, it's more about just giving some pointed examples. We have a rental that's on. We just reduced it. We reduced it some, not a ton, for 30. It's at 35,000, and we went through a Zoom call. And by the end of the Zoom call, the consumer was like, "Oh, well, my budget's 19." So, we're like, "Well, sorry, this is not this isn't going to be for you.
Right.
And another listing that, you know, we just took $1 million price cutoff from 11 to 10. And in the middle of the call, the consumer says they're only looking up to 9. You know, and so again, we're like, well, we just reduced it $1 million, so, and our seller's not at 9. So I think it's going to take a while for those buyers that are out there to go through this process and realize that people are not just going to give things away, in order for them to understand that they're going to have to start making offers that are more in line. I think a 10%, I think we're talking the 10% range is what I feel is going to be the more realistic and palatable range for also sellers. I think if people want deals, it is, like you said, it's either going to be really in the high end or it's going to be at new development. And new development where developers have a lot of inventory, so they've either gone to their lenders and said, we're willing to sell at strike prices, will you sign off on it? Or lenders that are starting to call loans on projects that have been out there for a while. And I think we're going to see that. So I think the lenders are going to start coming in. They're going to want their money back. Mm-hmm. And that's where the deals are going to be. So I think, you know, for people that have buyers, I would try and focus them on the new development inventory.
Have you, Heather, have you seen specific projects where the lenders have called a loan yet, or not? We're not there yet.
I've had some conversations that I can't disclose, but yes, there's definitely some of that going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, I can tell you, it's funny. I'm working on 2 new development deals this month. We worked a bunch more than that, ironically enough, but 2 that stuck out to me. One was a building that just launched sales before this, where clearly there's a lot of inventory. Another one that's been selling for 2 years where there's not much inventory left. And my negotiations on both deals were so drastically different, because the one where there's not much inventory left, chances are they paid off the construction lender already, and they're just sitting on these units where it's straight equity, and they're not conceding on anything. I mean, I advise a client they should get a mortgage contingency. They don't have the cash to buy cash. And I'm like, look, you know, in this climate, you need a mortgage contingency. Wouldn't even consider it. The client's a bit meticulous, wants to have punch list items, some of them, you know, addressed pre-closing. Developer said, absolutely not. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow, you know, in this market, like, these aren't crazy requests to make. And then flip the script to the one that just launched sales early in the year, a marquee project, bear in mind. I can't say the name of the building, but not a very high-end project. And they're throwing the kitchen sink at the buyer to get them to sign, because they want to start racking up, you know, percentages sold. So really, a lot of it I'm seeing depends on the specific project. You know, I did not think by telling the client who was buying the one where the majority of the building's already been sold that, you know, mortgage contingency would be something that even be questioned in this market. You know, what happened in 2008, you had 4 or 5 of the top 10 home mortgage lenders go bankrupt. You know, in a market like this with such an uncertain future, you know, you have the election coming up, you have a potential of a second wave of this in the fall, you have just more uncertainty than you've had in the world in over a decade. You know, I think a mortgage contingency is just common sense. You know, who's to say in 90 days a bank can honor a commitment letter? So it's interesting, but yeah, I agree on Heather's point. You got to monitor each specific project, because if you are looking for a deal, there will be construction loans that are called. Right now, we're living in a world of forbearances. You know, every bank is issuing a forbearance because the banks want to give developers, investors, owners the ability to weather the storm, in hopes that there is no second wave and the world rebounds to normal, when some people are speculating, you know, the V-shaped recovery we read about a lot. But nobody knows, right? We're all speculators at this point. So it's interesting, but I 100% think that's probably the best takeaway today is what Heather said: monitor project by project. That's what I'm seeing in terms of my negotiations as well.
Yeah, if you've got that investor buyer and they're out looking for deals, I wouldn't go knocking on doors on resales. I think that people will be spinning wheels. They're going to find minimal reductions, you know, unless it's the super high end and it's overpriced and the seller's not dealing realistically. But I'd focus more on new development, focus in areas where there's excess inventory, buildings that, you know, need to get to their 15% to declare their offering plan effective. I think there'll be opportunities there. And then projects that are kind of in that kind of, I always call them the teenage years. So it's like they've launched already. So usually in a project life cycle of a new development, at the beginning you get a big boost, in the middle it's nothing, and then you sell a lot at the end. So like projects that are in the middle of their cycles where no deals are happening, those are good opportunities probably too.
Yeah, I'm just happy to throw in our 2 cents as well, what we're seeing on our end. And, if Pierre's, if you're hearing from folks a few weeks after the brokers are, then I'm a few weeks after you even. So I'm the very last to hear from anyone. But what I can tell you from our end, orders are up modestly, which I assume was from deals that have happened 3 or 4 weeks ago. What I can tell you is that activity is up materially, whether it's from buyers that are interested in apartments and are engaging on our Sightline tools, sellers that are about to list and want to have a mild, call it, title work up on their property to make sure that they can go ahead and unload this asset as fast as humanly possible. Buyers also doing the same things on a handful of properties that they are interested in, making sure that if they're going to put in some favorable bids and offers on these places, they want to know that they can act quickly and not going to encounter something in the middle of their contract period that would prevent them from closing. So activity is up exponentially. I assume that's a good thing for the general marketplace when we're getting engaged and people are asking these very particular questions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I keep saying I can't keep track of all the sessions I've done. I started doing a weekly webcast to our school. I named it Real Estate Talks with Pierre Debbas. And my first one was predictions for the housing market with the economy reopening. And, interestingly enough, if you read the news about the housing market throughout the entire country, not just New York City, all the data is pointing in an incredibly positive trend. I mean, home sales are up year over date. Home mortgage applications are higher than they've been in years. Not for refinances, I mean for purchases. Interest rates are now at a historic low in the country, which we never thought we'd be saying after 2019. So there's a lot of great, trends for housing. The problem is our specific New York market, is the demand going to be there? Or I think the overwhelming question, or the looming question that's above all our heads is there going to be a real exodus of people leaving the city as a result of this pandemic? And I think you're going to start seeing whether that's true or not. I'm telling you, I have on my list, I tracked, I think the day one of phase 2, we had 8,123 residential properties on the market in New York, in Manhattan alone. I'm going to track next week to see how much it actually increased. And I'm curious to see, how this trend continues. And whether demand will really decline that much, or whether people will say, you know what, I think the biggest question a lot of New Yorkers have is, do I want to commit to an illiquid hard asset that I will commit to living in for the next 7 years of my life, right? Am I ready to say that I want to be in New York City for almost the next decade? And that's really, the tough thing to answer right now. Those of you guys who live here, my wife and I's nightly debate is whether we stay in the city. My answer is always absolutely yes. Stop talking to me about this. And her answers go to hell. I make the decisions, and we're leaving. And somehow we're still here. But I'm sure that's a very common conversation everybody's having on a nightly basis. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm an optimist on New York City. I've always been, but I could be in the minority.
So I want to chime in real quick. Sorry, Holly said something. She doesn't want to be unmuted, but I want to read this because it's going. And I know that this is one of the things that Nick and you and a lot of people in this room have young families, and so I just want to talk to Holly's point real quick. I do not want to speak, but would like to say that I think when pre-K through 12 schools make a decision as to whether they will be in session or just distance learning, it will be a factor. There will be a lot of people holding spots in private schools in New York and simultaneously Long Island, Connecticut, and Palm Beach.
Yeah, Holly, it's funny. I can tell you, my oldest son just finished kindergarten. He's going to first grade. And he has 2 friends that have already committed to leaving the city for all of next year and putting their kids in school. One's in California and one's in Massachusetts. And we're leaving for the year. The school's holding their spot, and then they're coming back. next year. So, or allegedly they're coming back. So yeah, I think that is going to be a huge concern for young families. I mean, I'm personally living it. You know, our biggest debate is, you know, how are we going to pay tuition for my son, my 5-year-old, to learn how to read on this, right? This is crazy. And that is going to push people out because people want their kids in school. It's not natural to have, you know, young kids sitting home all day. But I don't know. Again, don't listen to me on this. I'm one of the few people that say I'm staying here regardless. So I may be in the minority. But yeah, that's definitely going to be a big factor for demand and supply over the next couple months. No school's made a statement. No school knows what they're doing yet. You know, they don't know.
Here's Pierre, I thought you brought up a great point. This is kind of a question I have for Heather, and this is just, again, me as kind of now I'm a spectator. Pierre, your question, your question essentially was, what's the tipping point? What gets people to buy the apartment? And I'm thinking, you know, what gets people to commit to New York City for 5 to 7 years vis-a-vis an apartment purchase? Heather, I assume it's price, right? If you're getting 30% off and you're like, wow, I would never otherwise be able to get this price on this apartment, so I'll stay for 7 years because otherwise I wouldn't be able to afford this. Do you think that price is the tipping point?
I think people's decision to live and stay in New York is much more emotional than necessarily a deal. I mean, the cost of living is obviously a factor, but I think people that are in New York want to be in New York. New Yorkers are New Yorkers. And so when they're getting kind of emotionally pulled in different directions, it's creating too much uncertainty in them. And that's why I think we're seeing like people who were going to buy and now they're going to rent. The transaction cost alone, I mean, listen, there's going to be buckets of people, right? There are going to be people that will pull the trigger because they think they're getting a great deal. They know they're staying. I think only if people are buying, if they know that they're staying or they think for some reason it's a good investment.
Yeah.
I think right now there's so much uncertainty that many people are deciding to rent. They're waiting on the school system to see what happens. But I mean, I don't know how many of you, I'm kind of changing the subject a little bit, but I don't know how many of you have were gone and then came back to the city. In my case, I've been back for 3 weeks, and I have to say that I'm a lot more comfortable here than I thought I would be. And granted, I haven't gone on the subways. If I go somewhere, I'll drive, or if I have to really go far and driving's not an option, I think that I'm just going to take a bike. So I think it's different for everybody, but I have felt, because I mean, it's easy to get things delivered. It's easy to not have to necessarily leave the building, but you could still go outside and get some fresh air and go on the West Side Highway and go for a walk or a bike ride. And most of the people are wearing masks. So, I mean, to me, it's not I think it was more scary in my mind than the actual reality of being here.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I'd love to hear from other people if they've had the same experience, or people who have stayed here and how they feel that it is now versus then.
Hi guys. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Love your emoji. Very cute.
Thank you. To Heather's point, a lot of you know that I have a lot of clients out of the West Coast, and I'm finding that most brokers and just my clients that are out there don't really know how, slow our spread has become and how much safer it is here. And that's the word that I've really, really been trying to get out to people, that are New York based and on the West Coast, because I think we really need to champion New York as having really accomplished something. In California, the numbers are going up like crazy. They're not even all aware of that. So I think that, that's definitely a message that we all need to really get out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, I think that I don't think we have had the same situation go on where you've got people aren't out partying, they're not out doing reckless things. I think New Yorkers have taken this much more serious. And, you know, if numbers do consequently rise, I think it's generally like people coming back. Like I know families that were down in Florida, and now that it's hot down there and New York's opening up, they left Florida and they came back. And I think there's going to be some of that, and they're going to bring the virus back with them. So I think, you know, we're not out of the woods, but I think because everybody does take it seriously and they are wearing the masks and they're not being reckless, I think we're in the long haul, we're going to be better off. And I agree, Tamara. I think it's super important that we are touting our successes. And that's why I say, like, to me, I'm more comfortable here than I ever thought I was going to be.
Yeah, I stayed here the whole time, and people in LA would say, "Oh, how are you?" And for me, you know, I was like, it's so easy in New York. I can get anything delivered at a moment's notice. This is, you know, being asked to stay home is not that hard. I put a mask on when I go out. I'm not being asked to run 50 miles a day. That would be hard. So I agree, we're not out of the woods, but I do think we need to get the word out that it's lovely here.
Yeah, it is. You know, we've sent an email out before, and I still welcome you all to send us an email, and it's one of those things that we've been trying to put together. But and I don't know if you saw, like, we had a great Instagram post about the diversity in Manhattan and women in the workforce and things like that. But we want to build like a nice deck on stats about New York, that on what makes New York great. You know, I was in Florida for the first 8 or 9 weeks of the quarantine, and I have friends in real estate down there, and they're having seminars about how great it is to live in Florida and all the tax advantages. And I have a friend who developed a PDF that's called Apples to Oranges and all the benefits of living in Florida compared to New York. And I feel like we need our own ammunition, and we need to definitely highlight our successes and all that New York has to offer. So if anybody does come across any of those, any great stats, or have been, you know, thinking along the lines, it'd be great for us to, you know, crowd share that information so that we can really pump it out to the consumers.
Cool. I think that's a great sentiment to end on, to be honest. It's nice to hear some positivity for a change. Things are definitely improving. I mean, I've been coming to the office almost every day since the beginning of May. I was the only person here. Now I actually have half my office here. I'm a little socially awkward, so I don't know how to speak to people in person anymore. So that's been a little bit of a transition, but it's been really great to like see human interaction, and things are getting better, you know. And I can't tell you, I can agree with Tamara and Heather's comments. New Yorkers took this seriously. They've been extremely smart. You walk around the streets, people are, you know, I have friends all over the country, and we compare notes, and we took this 10 times more seriously than most. So it's been great. But guys, it's great to see everybody. Heather, if you don't have anything else to add, I think that is good, you know, a good note to end on. If you guys have any questions, concerns, topics you want to hear about, to be honest with you, is we've done so many of these sessions that I've enjoyed the open dialogue, because it helps me hear what's on everybody's mind. But if you guys have anything specific you want to talk about, you know, email us. We're always up for suggestions on comment. And thank you everybody, Nick, Heather, everybody else. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Pierre.
Take care.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.